Wealth buys luxury, but rarely buys class. Power reveals true character faster than money ever could. Watch what happens when sheer arrogance blinds one entitled pilot, forcing him to humiliate an elderly passenger dressed in rags. Karma strikes back, fiercely destroying careers and exposing billion-dollar secrets before takeoff. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, buzzed with its usual chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, blaring intercoms and rushing travelers, among the sea of hurried businessmen in tailored suits and vacationers in crisp leisure wear, one elderly man stood out like a sore thumb. Jeremiah Rollins looked tired. At 72 years old, his dark skin was lined with the profound map of a life filled with both intense struggle and monumental success. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, however, he looked nothing like the ruthless, brilliant mind who founded Rollins Global, a multi-billion-dollar logistics and private equity empire that secretly owned half the corporate contracts operating out of this very airport. Instead, Jeremiah was dressed in faded, paint-splattered denim overalls, a worn-out grey hoodie that had seen better decades, and scuffed, mud-caked timber boots. He had spent the previous 48 hours in a neglected Atlanta neighborhood, personally overseeing and physically assisting in the emergency renovation of a youth community center his foundation sponsored. The roof had collapsed during a storm, and Jeremiah, true to his roots as a former construction worker before he built his empire, had refused to sit in an air-conditioned office while the kids had nowhere to go. Exhausted, covered in drywall dust and smelling faintly of industrial primer, Jeremiah had barely made it to the airport in time for Flight 892 to Seattle. He hadn't bothered to change clothes. In his mind, he was simply a tired man going home, and he had paid a premium for the comfort of first class to sleep through the 5-hour flight. As Jeremiah shuffled down the jet bridge, he kept his head down, clutching his boarding pass. He stepped onto the gleaming Boeing 777. The air conditioning was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of roasted nuts and expensive citrus air freshener used exclusively in the premium cabins. Standing at the entrance of the first-class section was Pamela Jenkins, the lead flight attendant. Pamela had spent her 12-year career curating a snobbish devotion to the elite. She prided herself on remembering the drink orders of minor celebrities and treating the premium cabin like her own exclusive country club. When Jeremiah crossed the threshold, Pamela's artificial painted-on smile instantly vanished. Her eyes darted up and down his dusty overalls, her nose wrinkling in barely concealed disgust. "Excuse me, sir," Pamela said, her voice dripping with condescension as she physically stepped into the narrow aisle blocking his path. She extended a manicured hand palm out. "Coach boarding is further down. You need to keep moving to the back." Jeremiah stopped, his weary eyes meeting hers. He didn't sigh. He didn't get angry. He had dealt with people like Pamela for 7 decades. "I am in the right place, ma'am," Jeremiah replied softly, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone. He held out his boarding pass. "Seat 2A." Pamela snatched the paper from his hand, her eyes narrowing as she scanned it. She checked the date, the flight number, and the name. J. Rollins. "Seat 2A, first class." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. She assumed it was a system glitch, or perhaps a pity upgrade, given by a sympathetic gate agent who didn't know the unspoken rules of premium travel. "Wait here," she commanded sharply. Instead of waiting, Jeremiah gently bypassed her, his broad shoulders easily maneuvering through the space. He walked to the second row, stowed his small, battered canvas duffel bag in the overhead bin, and sank into the plush leather of seat 2. He let out a long, quiet exhale, closing his eyes as the tension began to drain from his aching joints. Across the aisle in 2B sat Nathaniel Brooks, a mid-level marketing executive, who immediately pulled his tablet closer to his chest, glancing nervously at the dust on Jeremiah's boots. Nathaniel didn't say a word, but his widened eyes communicated everything Pamela needed to see. The sanctity of her cabin had been breached. Pamela marched toward the front galley, practically vibrating with indignation. She grabbed the intercom phone, hesitated, and then knocked sharply on the cockpit door. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Gregory Mitchell. Gregory was 45, impeccably groomed, with a jawline he believed belonged in a pilot recruiting brochure. He was notoriously arrogant, known throughout the airline for his explosive temper and God complex. Gregory believed that as the captain, he was the absolute monarch of his aluminum kingdom. He despised any inconvenience, detested passengers who didn't fit his aesthetic standards, and had once delayed a flight for an hour because his coffee had been served lukewarm. The cockpit door unlatched, and Gregory poked his head out, annoyed by the interruption. "What is it, Pamela? We're trying to run through the pre-flight checklist." "Captain, we have a situation in first class," Pamela whispered, frantically leaning in so the passengers wouldn't hear. "There's a man in 2A. He's a vagrant, or a construction worker. He's covered in dirt, his clothes are filthy, and he smells like a construction site. It's completely inappropriate." Gregory frowned, his ego instantly flaring. "How did he get up here? Did someone from the back wander up? No, he has a ticket for 2. Ooh!" Pamela hissed. "But he's already making the other passengers uncomfortable. Mr. Brooks in 2B looks terrified. This man does not belong in premium. He's going to ruin the experience for everyone who paid good money to be here." Gregory's expression hardened into a self-righteous scowl. To him, first class was a reflection of his own status. He frequently mingled with the executives and celebrities who sat in those seats, fishing for compliments and networking opportunities. Having a dirty, ragged old man in his cabin was an insult to his authority. "Let me handle this," Gregory said, stepping out of the cockpit. He adjusted his epaulets, ensuring his 4 gold stripes were perfectly visible, and puffed out his chest. "No one disrespects my flight." As Gregory marched down the short aisle toward row 2, a younger flight attendant named Chloe Bennett watched from the galley. Chloe was new, still maintaining her empathy and love for the job. She had noticed Jeremiah boarding, and only saw a tired elderly man. She felt a knot of dread twist in her stomach as she watched Captain Mitchell approach the sleeping passenger, knowing exactly how cruel Gregory could be. Jeremiah had just drifted into a light doze, the exhaustion of the past 2 days finally overtaking him, when a sharp, authoritative tap struck his shoulder. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the bright cabin lights to find Captain Gregory Mitchell towering over him. Pamela stood a few feet behind the pilot, her arms crossed tight against her chest, a smug expression painting her face. "Wake up, buddy," Gregory snapped, skipping any professional greeting. "I need to see your boarding pass and your identification. Now." Jeremiah sat up slowly. He didn't appreciate the aggressive tone, nor the physical jab to his shoulder, but his demeanor remained entirely composed. He reached into the front pocket of his dusty overalls, retrieved the boarding pass, and handed it over alongside his driver's license. Gregory snatched them. He scrutinized the license, looking from the terrible DMV photo to Jeremiah's face, trying to find a discrepancy. "Jeremiah Rollins." Gregory read aloud, his tone thick with skepticism. He looked at the clothes again. "How exactly did you acquire this ticket?" "Mr. Rollins, did an employer purchase this for you?" Jeremiah's eyes darkened slightly, but his voice remained as calm as a placid lake. "I purchased it myself, with my own money." Gregory let out a short, patronizing laugh. "Right. First-class tickets to Seattle run about $3,000 on this route." You expect me to believe you bought this yourself? Look at you. You're tracking mud onto my carpet. The ticket is valid. Captain, Jeremiah replied, steady holding Gregory's gaze without blinking. I am seated in the seat I paid for. I am not causing a disturbance. I would like to go back to sleep. You are the disturbance. Gregory fired back his voice, raising just enough so that the entire first-class cabin could hear. Heads began to pop up from their seats. Nathaniel in 2B pretended to look at his tablet, but his ears were burning. This is a premium cabin. Passengers pay for a sanitary, comfortable environment. You are covered in filth, and frankly, your presence is a health and safety concern for my crew and my passengers. Jeremiah looked down at his clothes. There was dried paint on his sleeve and a smudge of drywall dust on his knee. It is paint and plaster, Captain. I assure you it is not contagious. If my attire offends you, I apologize, but it does not violate any airline policy. I determine what violates airline policy on my aircraft. Gregory leaned down, invading Jeremiah's personal space. The captain's breath smelled of peppermint and stale coffee. Under the contract of carriage, I have the absolute authority to remove any passenger who creates an offensive or unsafe environment. You have two choices, old man. Either you voluntarily move to the very back of the plane, assuming there's an empty seat near the lavatory, or you get off my aircraft entirely. From the galley, Chloe stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. Captain Mitchell, sir. He's just sitting there. He isn't doing anything wrong. The flight isn't even fully boarded yet. Shut your mouth, Chloe, or you'll be off this flight too. Gregory barked over his shoulder, his face flushing red with rage. He turned his venom back to Jeremiah. Well, what's it going to be? Jeremiah did not flinch. The billionaire had sat across negotiation tables from the most ruthless tycoons in the world. He had broken corporate monopolies and built cities from the ground up. The insecure rantings of an overpaid bus driver in the sky meant absolutely nothing to him. Yet Jeremiah also knew that arguing with a man blinded by his own ego was a waste of breath. I will not surrender the seat I paid for, Jeremiah said simply. If you wish to remove me, you will have to explain to your superiors why you delayed your departure to eject a compliant passenger. Gregory's eyes bulged. Fine. You want to play hardball. You picked the wrong captain. Gregory reached up and hit the call button, grabbing the intercom handset. Security to the front of the aircraft. Immediate passenger removal. A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Several passengers in first class exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman in row 4 pulled out her smartphone and discreetly started recording the interaction. Pamela looked triumphant, while Chloe looked completely mortified, a tear welling in her eye at the sheer humiliation the old man was being subjected to. Within 3 minutes, 2 armed airport police officers and a Delta ground supervisor boarded the plane. They looked confused as they approached first class, expecting a drunk and disorderly passenger, only to find a quiet, elderly black man in work clothes sitting perfectly still. Officers, Gregory commanded, pointing a rigid finger at Jeremiah. This man is being belligerent, refusing crew instructions and violating hygiene protocols. Remove him from my aircraft immediately. The lead officer, a burly man named Officer Jenkins, looked at Jeremiah, then back at the captain. Sir, has he assaulted anyone? I gave him a direct order to vacate the premium cabin and he refused. Gregory spat, losing his patience. Federal law dictates passengers must comply with crew instructions. Get him off. The officer sighed heavily. He hated these calls. He approached Jeremiah gently. Sir, I'm sorry, but if the captain wants you off, you have to come with us. If you refuse, we will have to arrest you for trespassing. Please don't make us do that. Jeremiah looked at the officer, recognizing a man just trying to do his job. He had no intention of fighting the police or causing a spectacle that would end up on the evening news in a way he couldn't control. "It's all right, officer," Jeremiah said, his voice carrying a quiet, undeniable authority that momentarily startled the policeman. "I will comply." Jeremiah slowly stood up. He reached into the overhead bin and retrieved his battered canvas bag. He slung it over his shoulder. The entire cabin was dead silent, save for the hum of the aircraft's APU engine. Before turning to leave, Jeremiah stopped. He looked directly at Pamela, who averted her eyes, suddenly, unable to meet the intensity of his gaze. Then he turned to Captain Gregory Mitchell. Gregory stood with his hands on his hips, a smirk of absolute victory plastered across his handsome face. He had defended his kingdom. He had put the old man in his place. "You have a very impressive uniform, Captain Mitchell," Jeremiah said, reading the man's name tag. "But a man is not measured by the cloth he wears, nor the authority he borrows." "Save the philosophy for the bus stop, pal," Gregory sneered. "Have a nice trip back to the slums." Jeremiah offered a small, terrifyingly calm smile. He leaned in just slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Gregory and the recording smartphone in row 4 caught. "You are making a very expensive mistake today, Captain. One that will cost you far more than a first-class ticket." With that, Jeremiah turned and walked down the aisle, escorted by the 2 police officers. As he passed the galley, he caught Chloe's eye and gave the young flight attendant a gentle, reassuring nod. Gregory laughed aloud, shaking his head, as the cockpit door beeped open behind him. "Expensive mistake," he mocked to Pamela. "What's he gonna do? Write a bad review on Yelp?" Pamela giggled, already returning to her bubbly persona. "Would you like your pre-flight espresso now, Captain?" "Make it a double," Gregory said, stepping back into the cockpit and slamming the door shut. Outside the aircraft, standing on the jet bridge, the ground supervisor apologized profusely to Jeremiah, handing him a rebooking voucher. Jeremiah didn't take it. Instead, he pulled a sleek, encrypted satellite phone from the pocket of his dirty overalls. He dialed a single number. It rang only once. "David," Jeremiah said, his voice entirely devoid of its previous warmth. "I need you to pull the corporate acquisition files for American Global Airlines. Yes, the ones we were going to finalize next quarter. I want the controlling shares purchased by the time the market opens tomorrow." And Jeremiah looked through the glass window of the terminal, watching the nose of the Boeing 777. Ground Flight 892, permanently. Inside the cockpit of Flight 892, Captain Gregory Mitchell settled into his plush leather seat, adjusting his headset with a smug sense of satisfaction. He took a slow sip of his double espresso, the rich, bitter taste perfectly complementing his inflated ego. He had restored order to his domain. "Atlanta ground. This is Flight 892 Heavy." Gregory spoke into the microphone, his voice smooth and dripping with professional confidence. "Ready for pushback and engine start." There was a brief hiss of static. Usually clearance at this hour took seconds. Instead, 10 seconds ticked by in heavy silence. "Flight 89 to Atlanta ground." The air traffic controller's voice crackled back, sounding unusually tense. "Negative on the pushback. Hold your position. We are receiving a direct Level 1 company halt from your corporate dispatch." Gregory frowned, exchanging a bewildered glance with his first officer. A Level 1 company halt was almost unheard of. It meant an immediate absolute grounding of the aircraft, bypassing local dispatch and coming directly from the airline's executive headquarters. "Ground 892, please confirm," Gregory said, irritation bleeding into his voice. "We have a full cabin, and we are green across the board. What is the nature of the halt?" "I don't have those details, 892, the controller replied firmly. "I just have the chief flight operations officer on an emergency line demanding that the aircraft engines remain entirely powered down. Atlanta station manager is currently walking down your jet bridge. Ground out. Outside the aircraft, the corporate world was enduring a seismic shift of unprecedented speed and brutality. 30 minutes earlier, David, the chief operating officer of Rollins Global, had executed Jeremiah's terrifying directive. The acquisition of American Global Airlines had been in the works for 8 months, meticulously planned by Jeremiah's top-tier financial analysts. They had quietly bought up proxy shares through shell companies waiting for the third-quarter earnings report to trigger a formal buyout. But Jeremiah's single phone call threw the timeline out the window. Within minutes, an emergency SEC Rule 13 D-1 filing was slammed through the digital pipelines of Wall Street. Rollins Global exercised hostile call options on millions of shares, securing a terrifying 51% controlling stake in the airline. At exactly the moment Gregory was asking for pushback, Thomas Harrison, the CEO of American Global Airlines, was sitting in his corner office in Chicago, staring at his computer screen in absolute horror. His phone rang. It was the chairman of the board. "Thomas, what on earth is happening?" the chairman screamed. "Rollins Global just initiated a hostile takeover. They own us. As of 5 minutes ago, Jeremiah Rollins is the supreme controlling shareholder of this airline." Thomas wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. I don't know. The acquisition wasn't supposed to happen this way. Why would Rollins jump the gun and pay a 30% premium to take us by force today? Before Thomas could formulate an answer, his private email pinged. It was an encrypted message directly from the executive offices of Rollins Global. Attached was a short video file and a single sentence. "Look at how your staff treats the owner of your company." Thomas clicked the video. It was a shaky smartphone recording, captured by the woman in row 4 of Flight 892. The video clearly showed Captain Gregory Mitchell leaning over an elderly black man in dusty work clothes, threatening him, mocking him, and illegally ejecting him from the aircraft while Pamela Jenkins smiled in the background. Thomas felt his stomach drop through the floor as he recognized the man in the dusty overalls. It was Jeremiah Rollins, the billionaire titan, the man who had just purchased their airline for $4 billion. "Get Atlanta on the phone," Thomas roared at his secretary, his face pale as a ghost. "Ground Flight 892. Ground it now and get the airport police to intercept Captain Mitchell immediately. Back on the Boeing 777. The cockpit door unlatched." Robert Jenkins, the Atlanta station manager, stepped inside. He was pale, sweating profusely, and clutching a two-way radio. "Robert, what the hell is going on?" Gregory demanded, ripping off his headset. "You're making me delay a cabin full of premium passengers." "Shut down the APU, Gregory," Robert said, his voice trembling. "Pack up your flight bag. You're off the plane." "Excuse me." Gregory stood up, his face flushing dark red. "You cannot remove a captain from his own flight without an FAA mandate. I am flying this plane to Seattle." "You aren't flying anything ever again," Robert said, bluntly stepping aside to reveal 2 Federal Aviation Security officers standing in the galley. "You and Pamela Jenkins are both relieved of duty effective immediately. The CEO of the airline is on the phone, and he wants you escorted to the concourse FVIP lounge. Now." Pamela, who had been listening from the galley, dropped the silver ice tongs she was holding. They clattered loudly against the floor. "Wait me. What did I do?" "Just grab your bags," Robert muttered, looking sick to his stomach. "Both of you." The walk of shame down the aisle of first class felt like 1,000 miles. Gregory's face was a mask of furious confusion, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Pamela followed closely behind her pristine uniform, suddenly feeling like a prison jumpsuit. As they passed row 4, the woman who had recorded the incident held up her phone, a knowing smirk on her face. They were marched through the bustling terminal, flanked by security, until they reached the frosted glass doors of the airline's most exclusive VIP lounge. The lounge was entirely empty of regular passengers. It had been cleared out by corporate decree. At the center of the room sat a massive mahogany conference table. Sitting at the head of the table was a man wearing a perfectly tailored midnight blue bespoke Brioni suit. He was sipping a glass of sparkling water. The mud and drywall dust were gone, but the face was unmistakably the same. It was the man from 2A. Jeremiah Rollins. Standing behind him were 3 high-powered corporate lawyers in sharp suits, holding briefcases that looked like they contained the financial ruin of entire nations. Gregory stopped dead in his tracks. His arrogant swagger evaporated, replaced by a sudden icy knot of sheer terror in his gut. Pamela gasped, her manicured hands flying up to cover her mouth. "Take a seat, Captain Mitchell," Jeremiah said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and devoid of the exhaustion he had shown on the plane. It was the voice of an apex predator. Gregory's legs felt like lead as he stumbled to a chair and collapsed into it. Pamela stood frozen near the door until a security guard gently pushed her toward a seat. I don't understand," Gregory stammered, his eyes darting between the lawyers and Jeremiah. "Who are you?" One of the lawyers stepped forward, placing a thick manila folder on the table. "This is Mr. Jeremiah Rollins, founder and CEO of Rollins Global. As of 20 minutes ago, Mr. Rollins is the majority shareholder and acting owner of American Global Airlines. You are sitting across from your supreme employer." The color completely drained from Gregory's handsome face. He looked like he was going to vomit. Pamela let out a pathetic, stifled sob. "You see, Captain Mitchell," Jeremiah began, folding his hands, resting them on the table. "I built my empire by understanding people. I understand that a company is only as good as the lowest level of respect it shows to its most vulnerable customers. Today I dressed like the men who work on my construction sites, the men whose hard labor pays for the tickets that keep your plane in the sky. And I learned exactly how you treat them. Mr. Rollins." "Sir, I was just following premium cabin protocol." Gregory pleaded, his voice cracking the deep baritone replaced by a high-pitched whine. "I thought you were a vagrant. I was protecting the brand." "You were protecting your own fragile ego," Jeremiah corrected, sharply, his voice slicing through the room like a steel blade. "You weaponized your authority. You humiliated a passenger purely for your own amusement. You didn't just violate airline policy. You violated basic human decency." Jeremiah tapped his phone on the table. "Furthermore, the video of your little power trip has been posted online. It currently has 4 million views on X and TikTok. The PR disaster you have created for my new airline is catastrophic." "Please!" Pamela begged, tears streaming down her carefully contoured face, ruining her makeup. "I need this job. I have a mortgage. I'll issue a public apology." "You will issue nothing," Jeremiah said coldly. "Pamela, your 12 years of curating a toxic elitist environment are over. You are terminated with cause, no severance, no benefits. And Captain Mitchell," Jeremiah stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked slowly around the table until he was standing inches from Gregory, looking down at the man who had towered over him just an hour before. "You told me that I picked the wrong captain," Jeremiah whispered, repeating the exact words Gregory had used on the plane. "But you picked the wrong old man. You are fired." The FAA has already been forwarded the video, along with a formal complaint from this airline regarding your abuse of captain's authority. Your commercial pilot's license is currently under review for revocation. You will never fly a passenger jet again. Gregory buried his face in his hands, completely broken. The kingdom he had ruled with absolute arrogance had crumbled into dust in less than an hour. Jeremiah turned to the lawyers. Ensure their badges are confiscated. Have security escort them out of the airport through the public exit. Let them carry their own bags. As Jeremiah walked toward the exit of the lounge, he paused and looked back at the station manager. Oh, and Robert. There was a young flight attendant on that aircraft, Chloe Bennett. She was the only one who displayed empathy and basic humanity today. I want her immediately promoted to the corporate management training program in Chicago. Double her salary and give her a first-class ticket to get there. Yes, Mr. Rollins. Right away, sir. Robert nodded fervently. Jeremiah walked out of the lounge, his private jet already waiting on the tarmac. He had a city to run, an empire to manage, and a youth center to finish building. Behind him, Gregory and Pamela were stripped of their wings, their careers destroyed by the sheer blinding force of their own entitlement. The world moved on, but the internet never forgot the face of the arrogant pilot who grounded his own life. True wealth whispers, but arrogance always screams. Captain Mitchell learned the hardest way that you never know who you are disrespecting, and karma always collects its massive debts. Did you love this satisfying story of ultimate justice? Hit that like button, share this video with friends to spread the message, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life revenge stories. Don't forget to ring the notification bell today.